Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer before we begin. This episode contains content that some listeners may find disturbing, so maybe don't listen with children around. Okay, now that's out of the way, on with the show. Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into unexplained mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. How are we all doing today?
Very well,
sweet.
thank you. Classic.
As usual.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Cool.
I'm also good.
I'm not bad
Thank you.
myself. We're all better now. Seems.
We've
Not
recovered.
last you. Oh, yeah. No, I'm sick.
So, the story today is about a group of hikers who went missing in the Ural Mountains in Siberia. It's called the Dyatlov Pass incident. It's named after the area it took place in, which is now known as Dyatlov Pass, after the leader of the expedition, Igor Dyatlov. So this is spelled Dyatlov, if you want to look it up. Dyatlov Pass. It's a fairly well-known mystery among those who are interested in this sort of thing, and it kind of gets weirder the more details you find out about it. Like, you get to one bit and you think, oh, we've heard all the details, and then another bloody weird thing comes out and you're like, it just throws the whole thing, throws all the theories that you've just come up with out the window, and it's really weird. But yeah, so I'm going to go straight into it because we've got a lot to cover, and I don't want this episode to be a million years long. And I'm also going to try to avoid names where I can, because they're all very Russian, and I don't want to offend everyone with my terrible pronunciation. I can't even pronounce pronunciation properly. But yeah. So, a bit of background before we begin. In January 1959, a group of 10 hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on an expedition in West Russia through the Ural Mountains to the peak of Mount Ortorton. It's about 60-year anniversary now, I think. January 1959.
Yeah.
We're recording this on January 2019, so yeah, bit of an anniversary. I didn't plan that, just happened to occur. There are some rumours in the local dialect called Mansi that this area can be translated as "don't go there," but there are no written sources. It's just something that people tend to mention and throw out there to make it seem more supernatural than the story actually is.
Mhm.
A bit of a creepy thing,
Yeah.
like to go to "don't go there," or like Death Mountain as some people call it, but
Ooh.
you can believe that if you want to. I personally don't. They were led by a guy called Igor Dyatlov, who assembled the party from his peers at the university who all had ski tour experience. Every member of the group was an experienced Grade 2 hiker and will be receiving Grade 3 certification upon their return. The point being is that they all knew what they were doing. These weren't complete skiing chumps who
Yeah,
were just going to go into the wilderness and die instantly.
like
me.
I would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like all three of us would.
Yeah. Can you imagine if it was us on this troop?
Just, here you go to West Russia, to this weird mountain of death, and try not to die. In
Yeah,
the,
but
in the 50s.
on a serious note, that is just enticing to some people.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
What, trying not
Like,
to die?
oh, let's go to the most dangerous place in the world, but people have still done Everest, they still go to the North and South Pole, stuff like that, so it's just going to entice people.
Mhm.
Like, Mountain of Death. It's like,
Mountain of death.
I did that, I got the t-shirt, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you've laid down the gauntlet.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm. Well, I call them crazy people, but...
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so the group was made up of 8 men and 2 women, who were all in their early 20s, apart from one guy, a 38-year-old, called Semyon Zoltaryov, who they met shortly before the trip. Which is a little weird. So I kind of couldn't work out the right timeline for when this guy joined the group, but it seems like as they travelled into the area, they were sleeping at like small villages along the way, and he was like a ski instructor in one of these villages who they met, and I guess they got along with, and he asked to join them on the trip. But yeah, it's a little sketchy, this guy. He'll come up later on as well.
Do you reckon he's meant to be like a Sherpa? Like a guide?
Maybe they use him as that, but he wasn't local to the area, I don't think. He was just living
Okay.
there for work.
Sure. Okay.
But his history is a bit weird because he was in the army for a long time, and in Soviet Russia, your army history is classified.
Okay.
So for the expedition, there were 3 diaries and a number of cameras taken by the group, and it's from these sources that the route of the expedition can be tracked. They started their expedition to Ortorton from the village of Vishai on the 27th of January. However, the next day, one of the members, Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back due to knee and joint pain. So the group now has 9 members. They're down the guy. This was a normal thing for him. He had this ongoing condition, and it happened to flare up as they were going on a trip, so he'd have to turn back.
Slacker.
Push through the knee and joint pain.
Yeah.
I mean, I also have sciatica, so I can't really talk, but...
Yeah, but as we said before, we would all instantly die on this trip, so... They hiked until the 1st of February, where they made camp on the northern slope of what is nowadays known as Dyatlov Pass, approximately 16 kilometres from Mount Ortorton. It seems that they had planned to make camp on the opposite side of the pass, but due to snowstorms and low visibility, they were 500 metres off their original route. It had been agreed beforehand that Dyatlov would send a telegram to their sports club upon returning to Vizhai after the trip. This was predicted to be on the 12th of February. However, Dyatlov had told Yudin before he left the expedition that the journey may take longer than they had originally thought. The relatives of the group soon became worried and organised a search party made up of local authorities, student volunteers and Mansi guides. They found the remains of the Dyatlov camp on the 26th of February.
It's quite a lot later than planned then, isn't it? 2 weeks later.
A lot later. So a little thing about this search party sort of thing was that it seemed like the local authorities wouldn't allow them initially to organise a search party, for whatever reasons, whether that's safety reasons or communist Russia reasons. But it's unsure why exactly it took them so long to organise the party. But yeah, this is like, 14 days after they planned to finish the expedition.
I wonder if that's just because 2 weeks isn't considered long enough for somebody to be missing on such a expedition, if you see what I mean. But it seems a long time, doesn't it? Like, you'd think even a few days either side, you'd start to get pretty worried about people in those sort of weather conditions.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it was the fact that it was such a large group that it made them less worried.
Yeah,
rather
true.
than if it was like 1 or 2 people in the wilderness.
Yeah.
So they found this camp. At the camp was a single large tent that the Dyatlov group had been using. The tent was constructed from 2 smaller tents and was immediately recognised by a member of the search party who had helped build it in the past. This tent is massive, by the way. There's pictures on... So I'm taking most of this from dyatlovpass.com, which is really handy. And if you go to search and go to the tent at the top, there's pictures of the tent, and it's a massive tent. Because when I first looked into this, I assumed they all had separate tents, but no, it was one massive tent for the whole group of them.
Oh yeah, it's a big old tent.
It doesn't seem that big.
Well, if you go down,
it's only about 4 meters
schematic
long.
of it, and you can see like the areas that they would occupy in the tent. It was snug.
Yeah,
Like, it instantly makes an impression though. Like, it's pretty...
Well, yeah, okay, it's definitely more than it's probably like a 16-man tent, I guess, which is quite big. No, it says it's made from 2 4-person tents, which is actually quite big, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess it would fit 8, but they snugged in there a bit. Snugged in there, that's a word. I made that now. It means to be snug.
Yeah. Well, you want to keep it warm, don't you?
It was warm. In the pictures as well, there's this stove thing that they made as well, built into the tent. It's labelled number 3 in the drawing. That would keep it really warm. That was like a custom stove they made, which was in no way dangerous at all, and possibly didn't catch fire to the tent. Where was I? So, the state the tent is in, the sides of the tent were cut open, and it was discovered during examination that the cuts were made from the inside. The tent was still standing, being stretched on poles and fixed with ropes, however it was partially covered in snow. Inside the tent, the hikers' belongings were mostly undisturbed. Present within were 9 backpacks filled with various personal items, 9 pairs of shoes, various sets of winter clothing, tools, food, notebooks and cameras. And they're the notebooks and cameras that I mentioned before that we got all the information from. Outside the tent lying in the snow was an ice axe, and near to that, Dyatlov's jacket. On the side of the tent, lying above 10 centimetres of snow, was Dyatlov's torch, which still worked, upon the rescuers arriving at the camp. Now that's weird because it seems that the torch was put after there'd been a snowfall, so it seems like there's a bit of a gap between them abandoning the tent and leaving this torch there.
Yeah.
Unless
I had
it
to leave all
snowed.
their stuff.
I will get to it.
So many questions.
I told you, it gets weirder as you go through it. Now,
So they tried to escape the tent.
Yeah, they cut their way out of the tent from the inside and left all their stuff.
Yeah, someone had a really bad stomach.
Perhaps.
That's definitely, that's, oh God, we can't get out. Like, if you've ever been camping.
If it was me, you'd be dead.
If you've ever been camping, the fear of the zip being stuck while you're on the inside.
Oh God, yeah.
There's nothing quite like that. As you're just like trying to jimmy the zip. You're just like, oh my God. And like, you get more and more panic, especially in the middle of the night when you need a wee.
Yeah.
That's the worst time.
Cut it open, grab the ice axe.
Yeah.
It's too blunt. Why would you use an axe? So, leading approximately 1 kilometre from the campsite down the slope, the search party found 8 or 9 sets of footprints. They walked in single file.
8 or 9?
8 or 9. It was hard for them to tell because obviously there'd been snowfall since. It's 2 weeks after. They walked in single file with a tall man walking in the back. The last person was wearing boots, and the others were either barefoot or wearing socks.
Okay, this is interesting. Why would you be barefoot in that kind of weather?
Well, they left their shoes in the tent, didn't they?
Obviously in a panic, yeah.
Yeah.
So they stopped searching for the night because weather got really bad. But the following day, the first 2 bodies were found by the search party. They were found in the direction of the footprints, leading approximately 1.5 kilometres from the tent. The bodies were lying under a cedar tree close to the remains of a fire pit. Both of them were very lightly dressed in long-sleeve shirts with cotton undershirts beneath, shorts and socks with no footwear. Since there were plenty of stumps present in the scene, we can assume that the trees had been cut to make the fire pit. The search team stated that the volume of work done here in making this number of cuts suggests that there were more people here than only these 2. All of the lower branches of the cedar tree were broken up to 5 metres high. These types of branches are difficult to cut, and so suggest that someone clambered up the tree, perhaps to locate the tent in the darkness. So, in terms of injuries on the bodies, they both showed various bruises and scrapes, but nothing life-threatening. In one of the bodies, liver mortis spots were located at the back of the neck, torso and extremities, which was not consistent with the position of the body in which it was found.
What spots, sorry?
Liver mortis spots.
What's that?
I'll explain it in a second. The liver mortis spots were located at the back of the neck, torso and extremities, and they're not consistent with the position of the body in which it was found. This suggests that the body was moved sometime after the blood stopped circulating. However, this is a point of debate because it's possible that the medical examiner mistook frostbite erythema for liver mortis. So, from what I can tell, these are basically like bruises, which happen due to like blood flow stopping in the body.
Yeah.
If that, I Stuart probably knows
liver
what these are.
mortis, so the liver dying, it'd be just liver spots, right?
It's liver.
It's with an O. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Basically,
liver mortis.
when you stop, when your heart stops working, your blood basically becomes stagnant.
Yeah, it clots.
Part of that process is that blood naturally leaks out of your blood vessels over time. But once the heart stops beating, blood collects in certain gravitational areas, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to find a body that had been lying on the floor for a while, blood would all be collected over the back, just where gravity's caused it to pool. And you just get basically discoloration. So the erythema is just redness. It's just the medical term for redness.
Right, okay.
So that you just basically get a collection of red areas.
And when you get frostbite, it would also go red or black, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think that's what Alex was referring to from the medical examiner.
Yeah, the point being, if the examiner didn't fuck up, then it seems that the bodies had been moved after their death.
Okay.
Which again fits with the theory that there was more people at the camp than just these 2.
They might have tried to move them or whatever,
Yeah.
So can I just quickly ask at this point, so how many people are there in the camp at the moment? So we've got 1 drop out.
Yeah, so 1 left just before they set off, and then they were down to 9 people.
And we think there are 8 or 9 sets of footprints.
Yeah.
So at the moment we're reasonably accounting for everybody, perhaps 1 missing.
Yeah. There were no bodies at the original tent.
Sure. Okay.
And
then we find 2 bodies.
Just for your use, probably, Stuart, if you go to search and the cedar on the website, So it's underneath the tent where we were looking before. There's like loads of pictures on this of the dead bodies, and there's also
Lovely.
medical examinations post-mortem of all the bodies. So
Cool.
if you want to skim through those, if you see anything I haven't mentioned,
Sure.
it's there for you. Right, so where was I? The same man who showed the liver mortis spots also had grey foam coming from his open mouth, and with the most apparent cause being pulmonary edema, which is excess fluid in the lungs. Conspiracy theorists can make the claim that this could be caused by someone pressing on the chest cavity before death, which was a common interrogation method used by the Communist Law Enforcement Agency. But this fluid could also be a result of a nasty fall, such as from a tree. According to the autopsy, they both died of hypothermia. There was nothing really that stood out after examining the bodies. They basically just froze to death.
Okay.
So, 3 more bodies were found at various distances between the original campsite and the cedar tree. These were Dyatlov, a male and a female. They were all found in poses pointing towards the tent, suggesting that they were attempting to return there before they died. They were better dressed than the previous 2, but still not well enough for minus 30 degrees weather. So we're talking sort of like jumpers, undershirts, ski trousers, hats, but like not shoes really, and not like multiple jumpers with coats and things like that. The male wore a single boot, however Dyatlov and the female only wore socks. Similar to the bodies found at the cedar tree, the corpses showed only superficial injuries, however the male had a small skull fracture. The autopsy concluded again that they had all died of hypothermia. So that's 5 of the 9 accounted for, but the final 4 wouldn't be found until the snow began to melt 2 months later. So we've got 5 people who've all died of hypothermia. 1 guy has a small skull fracture, but they assume that wasn't the cause of death. Like, it wasn't large enough to be an issue for the guy. Like, maybe he was living with it.
Yeah, I guess I wonder if they've managed to date it. I guess if you're also worried about people falling out of a tree, you could probably quite easily fall out of a tree and smack your head on the floor. But I don't know. Also, the ground probably is not going to be very forgiving when it's minus 30. It's not like nice fluffy snow that you're going to land in. It's going to be frozen snow, isn't it?
So the last 4 hikers, a woman and 3 men, were found in a makeshift den dug from a ravine 70 metres from the cedar tree in the opposite direction from the tent. So this is further down the slope from the tent. The den, which is a common way to avoid harsh winds of cold environments, suggests that the group are clearly lucid and making any attempt to survive. In the centre of the den, cedar branches have been piled up on the floor in order to reduce contact with the snow. These people were much better dressed than the previous 5. Their attire was almost good enough for the Siberian conditions, but sort of seemed cobbled together, because it was later found out that some of them were wearing clothes that belonged to the hikers at the cedar camp. So the reason I say cobbled together is that they were often like ripped, or they were the wrong size. So it seems like they'd taken clothes from the hikers at the cedar camp in like an emergency sort of thing.
Yeah, like frantic kind of.
Yeah.
Grab anything you can, whatever sizes, whatever. Which
again would fit with the fact that the bodies were possibly moved after they died, because obviously they'd have to move the bodies to cut the clothes off them.
Yeah.
The majority of the clothes taken away are unused, however, apart from a jumper and a pair of trousers which were found on the corpse of the woman. So a lot of the torn clothes were left in the den, just in the centre of it. There is a picture of the den, if you scroll further down. Below Rust and Slobodin, there's 3 pictures with a little map, and you can see how deep this den is. Like, it's, 12 foot deep, maybe?
Well, I can see where you're going with this.
Can you? Where am I going with this?
Bigfoot. Or Abominable Snowman or something like that.
Perhaps. We'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah, you see it. So there's the den with the pile of twigs in the centre, which they can lie on. There's a guy standing there. I'm assuming he's going to be, 6 foot tall? He's about halfway up, so it's about 12 foot deep.
So they're actually in the den?
They're a little away from it.
Okay. So there's no one lying actually in that nest bit?
No. But this isn't a natural thing. This is clearly man-made. So it's not like they happened upon it. So, as I said before, the clothes present on the bodies were commonly ripped or showed fire damage. Another strange thing about these articles of clothing was that after testing, they were found to have abnormally high levels of radioactivity.
Yeah?
Yeah, it gets weirder and weirder.
Chernobyl.
So, moving on to the bodies, what's weird about these 4 is that they didn't die of hypothermia. Instead, all of them have serious physical injuries. They were found a few feet from the improvised shelter, lying in a stream in the deeper part of the ravine. The woman was lying against a natural ledge with water rolling over it with her mouth open. She had major chest fractures, with many ribs broken.
Oof.
Also, her eyeballs and tongue were missing.
There
There is a picture of the woman, just below that chunk of text below the ravine. The left picture is her leaning against this ledge. That's the photo they took of the body when they found it originally.
It's a pretty horrific set of injuries, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Zolotarov, who I mentioned before, the weird guy, had similar injuries with a massive chest fracture and missing eyeballs. The second man had a deformed neck, and the third man had major skull fractures. An interesting thing about his injuries is that the bodies don't show external wounds associated with the bone fractures. It's as if they'd been subjected to very high pressure conditions. The autopsies of the last four failed to give explanations for these injuries. So yeah, it's really strange, because it seems like they've just been slowly crushed by a really heavy weight. Because there's no, outward stabs or strong bruising and stuff like that, and scrapes that would suggest that they've been, hit by a car or something. It's really weird.
That is weird. And they're not exactly simple injuries, either.
No.
They're
really complicated fractures and stuff like that.
Yeah, you'd expect there to be other signs of trauma, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Don't click graphic photos 18 plus of the post-mortem.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, but for our listeners, it's not actually too bad, to be honest.
It's not too bad.
They're very low quality black and white pictures.
Disclaimer warning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's all the information I've got.
Okay.
So, initially, what do you reckon? What do you reckon's happened to these people?
Like raiders or, nomads or something, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's quite ritualistic to take out their eyeballs and their tongue and stuff. That's a bit excessive. They wouldn't have done that to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they would have, I don't know.
Okay.
That's weird. I honestly don't know what to say. Obviously, there's the other side of it, you think of the Yeti and the Abominable Snowman, stuff like that. I don't know. What do you think, Stu?
Yeah, so they're fleeing something. From what you said, there was no damage to the tent. Initially I was thinking, I wonder if the tent has caught fire. But because you'd panic with that and you'd run and you'd forget about everything behind you.
There was damage to the tent, but it's obviously...
But they've cut their way out of it, haven't they?
By the sounds of it,
it's not like half of it's been destroyed by fire that you'd run from.
Yeah. There was fire damage on the clothes, though. That is something to point out.
I just wonder whether or not... I was trying to think
that could have just been accidental.
Mm-hmm.
Before.
Yeah. I was trying to think of what would cause you to flee in a panic. I was thinking maybe an animal attack, but you'd think you'd probably actually stay in the tent. I was thinking what if there were wolves, for example?
Mm-hmm.
And you might be fleeing it, and then you'd be fleeing it in a group in a very simple single file route so that you don't all get lost in the snow, probably trying to break your line of sight or cover your tracks by the fact that the weather is blowing behind you.
Yep.
But then they stopped under a tree, so it's not like they then went and protected themselves straight away for some of them, building this fire pit. But the wound it's kind of skipping over that a little bit. The wounds all sound pretty barbaric. I guess the thing about the eyes and the tongue going missing is that I wonder if that could be scavenging animals, eating the flesh after death. Like birds, for example, will go for the soft, squishy eyes of anything that dies straight away.
Yep.
But wouldn't necessarily pull your tongue out, I don't think. Unless there are crows walking around pulling tongues out of dead bodies that I don't know about. But yeah, that makes me think that there's something a bit more barbaric at play, really. Yeah,
that's why I thought, it's very specific for an animal to do that, like you said. So it does seem a bit more either barbaric or ritualistic.
Mm-hmm. These are all good points you're putting out. I'll address the Sean's point first.
Wait, which point's that? Sorry.
The one where you said perhaps they got attacked by raiders or a group of people. The problem with that is that this is a very sparsely populated area, and the local people called the Mansi are very peaceful people. they're not like a warlike people. They take well to outsiders and stuff like that.
Except for one night every year.
Ah, yes, the Purge, they call it. They've made several films about it. The Mansi Purge of Siberia.
Okay.
And the only footprints were the single file 8 or 9 sets.
Oh, true.
But also, if they wanted to hide
Well,
their
the only
footprints...
observed footprints, though. Because I reckon if you're living there, you've probably got some sort of snowshoey adaptation, which probably wouldn't give you footprints and would quite easily brush off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where were the skis? Or snowboard? Maybe someone's like a really cool trickster, just snowboards their way in, crushing people's chests and stealing their towels.
Wearing their GoPro.
Yeah.
Stuck it on YouTube
But
afterwards.
also, now that I think about it, what would have been the motive? Except for some kind of ritualistic thing. All their stuff was left, in theory, that we know of. So...
Yeah, it points away from like a robbery, doesn't it?
Yep. And the point about the eyeballs and tongue, which a lot of people... So I've watched a few documentaries about this while I was doing the research, and a lot of the more ones which want to like make it shocking, and like they'll say, oh, it's called Don't Go There, it's called Death Mountain, stuff like that. They really focus on the eyeball and missing tongue. And the problem with it is, the state the body is in, lying against this rock, in a stream, it's possible that the water could just have dissolved the eyeball and the tongue.
Really?
Yeah, because they were...
Salty, maybe?
Well, I guess frostbite.
She had her mouth open, for one. And so, in snowy conditions, having a stream like this suggests that it's warmer for the rest of the area because it's not frozen over. And if you've got moving water over a corpse for weeks... Because remember, this is... These bodies were found much later. They were found months afterwards. So if you've got continuous flowing water over a corpse's face, you're going to have some sort of damage.
Yeah,
from
what about the
water.
others, though?
Now, the only other guy who had a missing eyeball was Semyon, and he was also in the same stream. All the other bodies had no damage like that. It's just these 2 corpses.
Yeah, so that does strike me like... It's not. That doesn't seem too far from the realms of possibility. Like the eyeballs, again, like any animal could have got it. Like maggots could have just digested it over months. If there's flowing water, there's generally life, isn't there? So insects, arthropods, kind of digesty after death critters will take the soft fleshy bits.
Delicious, squishy bits.
Yeah, delicious squishy bits. If they've got like the tongue itself, again, is going to be one of those things that. It's just going to die, isn't it? Like everything else. But like you said, if there's something running over it, it is literally just going to erode. Was there any... I don't know whether or not you'd be able to answer this, Alex, but was there any other signs of like erosion to the face? Like, was the rest of the face really damaged?
Why don't you click on those graphic crime scene photos and have a look?
So what's the name of the lady, just so I can find the picture?
Lou... Oh, don't make me pronounce the names.
Lyudmila Dubinina. Lyudmila Dubinina. There you go.
Okay, we've offended Sweden now.
It makes it a lot easier to say.
Well, it does say in the autopsy report, soft tissues are missing around eyes, eyebrows, nose bridge, and left cheekbone is partially exposed.
Yes, that's consistent with running water across the left side of the face over perhaps the kind of oral cavity to lose the tongue.
Soft tissues of the upper left are missing, teeth and upper jaw is exposed.
It's a pretty grim picture as well. If you're looking at the one that I've seen, it's like the second from the bottom.
Oh, I haven't clicked on it. I'm not going to click on that.
Oh.
Just made you click on it.
The picture second from the bottom has a lot of the face eroded. You can quite clearly see that the entire upper jaw is exposed, as looks like the muscles of the side of the face, probably suggesting that the skin over it's been eroded. So I actually think that's probably a reasonable conclusion.
Reasonable, yeah.
Case solved.
And we're done. It's just that a lot of the theories I've looked at very much use the missing eyes and tongue as like a crux for their whole theory. And they really focus on it. And
I really wish this website wouldn't do that.
Do what?
I actually clicked on the link. Obviously it takes you to the second part of the website where it actually has all these images. But then it automatically changes to the next picture.
Oh.
because it's on like a slideshow thing, but I didn't realize. So I clicked on that one that you were on about, Stu, and the next one is of Semyon Zolotaryov.
Oh, yeah.
It's like looking straight at you, with, like no eye sockets.
Into his cold, dead, missing
like,
eyes.
Jesus Christ, don't do that.
Buried, yeah, picture 65 is bearing into your soul. Like,
yeah, it's
good
horrible.
luck sleeping tonight, Sean.
But I literally looked away for a second, looked back, and this new picture was loaded. I was like, ah, fuck. No.
Yeah. The website is cool, though. It's like the Jack the Ripper one, where it's all there for you.
It's laid out.
Yeah.
You make your own impression.
Very cool. Right, so I'll get on to the theories that people put forwards about it.
Yeah, this will be interesting.
So the first one is called paradoxical undressing. Now, have you heard of this? Because I'd heard of it before.
I don't recognise the name, but I wonder if perhaps I recognise it.
You probably understand what it is.
Sure. Oh, is this to do with hypothermia?
It is.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I actually do know it.
So this is a phenomenon commonly seen with victims of hypothermia, in which they begin to discard their clothing as they become continually disorientated.
Oh, really?
So you're freezing to death, but you think you're burning up, so you start taking your clothes off. Some people blame this phenomenon for the deaths of the hikers because some of the bodies were severely underdressed. However, it's clearly seen by the ripped clothes present in the den that they were cut off the men at the Cedar Camp after they died. Several of the hikers were fairly well dressed, and not all of them had died from hypothermia. So that's the issue with that theory.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an actual phenomenon which happens in real life.
Yeah, it does.
Interesting.
It kills a lot of people on Everest, I think, for the same reason.
Yeah. It's weird, like your body just tells you, oh, something's wrong, you must be burning up, quick, get cold.
Well, I think, this is not me talking medically at all, but you know when your hand is really cold, like when you've been having a snake fight as a kid, you get cold burns, don't you? And you get that kind of really warm feeling at the tip of your fingers, presumably because your nerves are in overdrive because they're so cold.
Yeah.
But you get that really warm feeling. If you imagine if your entire body felt that way, you'd probably feel like it's a burn rather than...
Yeah, like a freeze burn, yeah.
Yeah, rather than it being because of the cold. So if you feel like you're burning up, I mean, the logical response is to get anything off you that's making you feel that way. But I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's possible it could have happened in this case, with maybe the four other bodies which were between the tent and the cedar, because they were kind of underdressed. But again, there wasn't any discarded clothing found besides in the den, so you can kind of rule the paradoxical undressing out.
The thing that's getting me the most with this, though, is the broken ribs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure one of them has a skull fracture as well.
Yeah,
for example, so that could be from falling over.
Could be. The den was pretty deep.
Yeah, if they've fallen into the den. But was there anyone else that was nowhere near the den that was found with those sort of injuries?
There was one guy who was in the group of four which were found between the tent and the cedar, and he had a really small skull fracture. But it didn't seem to be life-threatening, like as if he'd done it in the past and he was just living with it.
Oh, okay. Or maybe he climbed the tree and then fell out.
Do we know where that, actually, just as a point of interest, do we know where that skull fracture is?
There is a picture. I couldn't...
do you know which person
I'll have a look
is?
for you now. Rustin Slobodin. He's the last one before the den, because there's a picture of the skull diagram. Now, I know nothing about skull fractures, so I've just kind of glazed over it when I was doing the research.
I know this is, obviously we're potentially getting ahead of you, Alex, who's going to probably be talking about this, but there's multiple injuries to this chappie, including bruises and blood stains all along his hands, along his face. His right forearm has like a skin tear in it. So the frontal bone of your head is a pretty solid bone. But it's a fracture along where the skull fuses.
I was going to say where it would start getting weaker, right?
Well, yeah, although it's typically not it's not like a really, really common length of fracture, because the red line says it's like 60 millimeters long. That's quite a long fracture. I would imagine that probably needs an object roughly 60 millimeters wide. It's probably like the width of your fist is probably about 5 or 6 centimeters.
Right.
Like you could quite imagine that as being somebody's punched him and it's caved his skull in, but it's going to have to be a pretty hard punch. That is a particularly soft spot, though, of your head. It's a natural weak spot. Right. So that's not out of the question to fracture that from a significant trauma, but I wonder whether or not the other injuries point to perhaps like infighting.
Perhaps. I kind of skimmed over them because they weren't life-threatening injuries.
Yeah,
like, sure. I mentioned that all of the bodies have like bruising and scrapes and stuff, which would be the case if you were dying in the wilderness. You'd be dragging your body and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be clawing your way along the environment around you, wouldn't you?
How drunk were they as well?
Not drunk at all.
But they were Russian. No, seriously, I did actually read a bit.
Where is my potato vodka?
I'm not being racist. There was actually a bit to do with, if you look on the homepage on the timeline at the bottom, January 24th, the group of 10 arrives at Serev in the morning, where Krivo was detained for soliciting and singing out loud, and released, and the drunk accuses them of having stolen his vodka.
Yeah.
So
the thing about this is I looked into it a little bit, and they were drinking on the way there when they were staying in these villages and stuff. But on the actual trip, in the diaries, they said that they sweared off alcohol and smoking for the whole trip as a way to like test themselves. Whether that's true, I don't know. And whether there was alcohol present in the tent, I don't know. But it seems that they were all sober at the time.
I presume they wouldn't be that stupid if they're the kind of travellers that... I was half joking, but I just wanted to rule it out, because if they're that, determined to do this kind of trip, I don't know if it was called the Death Mountain beforehand, or whatever, but, I presume they'd know that, how, dehydrating alcohol is and how bad it is for you when you're trying to do that kind of physical exertion.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'll point to the cedar tree camp and the den, which were clearly shown they were lucid and they knew what they were doing. Because building that den took quite a lot of effort. It's clear in the photos. There's a lot of digging that was involved in that. But I'm no expert in Siberian den making, so I have no idea.
You clearly haven't done your research, Alex.
Yeah, it's not on your CV. God,
I'm sorry I haven't watched that guy on YouTube who primitive technology who makes dens in the wilderness. He's probably got a Siberian den video.
Yeah,
probably.
Right. So the second theory, which is probably the most widely known theory, I wouldn't say widely accepted, but most widely known, is a avalanche theory. So, avalanches are a fairly common occurrence in the Ural Mountains, and such an event helps to explain why the tent was cut from the inside.
Because they want to get out as soon as possible, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, perhaps in the middle of the night, the tent was suddenly buried by an avalanche. They cut themselves free from the tent and made their way to the tree line, where they would be safer from a second event. They were forced to make the trip in any clothes that they could quickly retrieve from under the snow, which gives a reason why they were so poorly dressed. In the darkness, the hikers got separated into two groups. One group tried to return to the tent, but got further split up before freezing to death. The other group made camp at the tree line, but two of them died from hypothermia. The remaining four then made their way further into the forest and made a den to protect themselves from the cold, but they got caught up in the second avalanche, deeply burying them and providing enough pressure to cause the bone fractures.
Yeah.
So the reason I like this theory, besides the avalanche bit, which is the important part of the theory, but I think the more important part is that it gives a timeline of events sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where they escape from the tent, get split up. It clearly explains why they're in three groups and why they all died in the darkness.
I don't like it because I don't think the snow would have just disappeared from the tent. If there was an avalanche, that tent would have been destroyed.
Yeah, and
completely.
I completely agree.
It wouldn't still be standing.
And
the belongings inside wouldn't be in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be everywhere. So I completely agree that they might have thought there was an avalanche. They might have been, I don't know, was the area prone to earthquakes, which might have caused an avalanche. But if they felt in any way that they could hear snow falling, or if they're experienced travellers or whatever, then they might have experienced it before. So maybe they were panicking, thinking it's the middle of the night. We can't see what's going on, but there's a big sound. Let's just get out. Because there's no proof of there being anything. So no matter what they heard, I'm thinking that they fled because they was annoyed, not because of anything in particular.
Okay.
That noise, though, could have been the avalanche.
Yeah, but...
Because you can imagine, like, if you hear a significant noise that you think will put the tent in danger, you'll get out as quick as you can.
Yeah, but...
Once you're out...
Where was the avalanche hitting?
Well, it might not
definitely
hit
didn't
tent,
hit the tent.
Yeah,
I was going to say, yeah.
Because, like, an avalanche would be loud. If it's quiet, or you've only got the sound maybe of the weather, like a wind, like the sound of snow, like rumbling as it falls, is going to be loud enough to make you worried. What I mean is, you can imagine them evacuating for fear of the avalanche destroying the tent.
Yeah.
Going out into the wilderness, and then the eventual avalanche that perhaps is nowhere near the tent, but it sounds like it's near the tent, then explains how they then panic, they get disorientated because there's an avalanche happening. They split off into two groups. Two people get involved in the avalanche, so it then becomes three groups, and then people eventually just get trapped, can't go anywhere, are completely disorientated. Perhaps snow obstructs their ability to find the location of the tent, which is why they're climbing the tree. Mm-hmm. You can kind of see how that might be a possibility. I don't know. That might be total rubbish, but that actually seems more likely to me than them being like, oh my God, there's an avalanche hitting the tent. But yeah. I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, these are all good points.
Yeah.
The main problems with the avalanche theory is that there were no obvious signs an avalanche had taken place in the area.
Well,
such as, because it would leave a large amount of debris distributed over a wide area, whether that be like twigs and branches and rocks and and stuff like that, bodies maybe. Also, from what I can tell of the photographs, the slope doesn't seem to be steep enough for an avalanche. I looked it up, and apparently slopes need to be over 25 degrees before they will start to slide.
Okay.
Whether that's just whether the photos I used are too zoomed in, and maybe further up it was steeper, and the momentum carried it on towards the flatter areas. Another issue is that it's even less likely that an avalanche would have happened at the den due to the number of trees, because it was really forested.
Okay, sure.
There is an alternate theory that the den corpses were injured by the initial avalanche at the tent, and then they made their way with the group whilst injured towards the bottom of the slope. But that requires them to have made their way to the den with all these bone fractures. Yeah. And also the guy with the massive skull fractures would definitely be knocked unconscious, so he would have had to carry him.
Well, you think so? Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps the avalanche killed them instantly and transported the bodies to the den site, but there are at least 8 sets of footprints leading away from the tent. So that seems unlikely. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with the avalanche theory, but I like it because it gives a nice little story which explains some of the details of the case, but not all of them.
I still wonder, like, the noise of an avalanche, whether or not it happened nearby.
Yeah, it's a good
because it could have been that the movement of snow is going to create a lot of noise. If it happened even in like a 50-meter radius, 100-meter radius, 200-meter radius, it's probably going to make a noise. It might have just sparked the panic. It led to everybody just going out into the wilderness completely unprepared. But then I guess the problem with that is that then it doesn't explain the injuries. So
it gives a reason for the evacuation, but not for the injuries.
Not for the injuries, yeah. Okay.
So the next theory is called infrasound. You probably haven't heard of this. I haven't heard of it before. I looked into it.
You probably never heard of it.
You know, I'm really clever about these things.
Pun intended.
Really knowledgeable.
Oh.
Okay, we're done. That's it. Thanks for listening. That was episode 7.
It makes me think of that joke, which is, who's the coolest guy at the hospital? The ultrasound guy.
God, it's so bad.
It is so bad. Anyway, right, moving swiftly on. You can cut that bit if you want.
And I will.
Interesting.
So, a rare weather phenomenon could have created this thing called infrasound, which apparently induces irrational fear in people. Due to the topography of the area, the winds which blow through the pass could have created a number of small tornadoes, which are called Carbon Vortex Streets, which is a really cool band name, by the way.
That is such a cool name.
Carbon Vortex Street. These are actually real things as well. You can see.
We should rename the podcast now.
You can Carbon Vortex Street.
Everyone will be like, what the heck?
Oh, I have to,
Why is it changed
I have
its
to
name?
redo all the branding. So much effort. But it's worth
Hey
it for the
guys,
Carbon
welcome to
Vortex.
Carbon Vortex Streets podcast.
And then we have to explain what it is before we start each episode. It's a bit of an in-joke, but yeah. These are actually like a real thing as well. You can see the top-down weather pictures that you'll see sometimes of like cloud cover, and there's these big lines of small tornadoes, and apparently they're real, according to the internet. These vortexes can produce infrasound, a type of vibration in the air, which has a frequency so low it cannot be picked up by the human ear. It could have caused the hikers to flee the tent, get lost in the wilderness, and freeze to death before they came to their senses. It doesn't explain the den, though, because building such a structure suggests a level of lucidity. As I said before, carbon vortex streets are an actual thing, and such weather has been observed in similar locations, such as the Rock of Gibraltar. The effects of infrasound are also demonstratable, as a UK study in 2003 found that a fifth of people exposed to infrasound report feeling anxious, scared, or unable to breathe properly.
Ooh.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Well, okay, first of all, I like this theory because it goes along with what I said, that they heard a noise that would have scared them.
You don't
and
hear
if they're
noise,
all,
though.
half sleeping.
You can't. It's
you
a really low frequency.
Well, okay.
And it makes you feel anxious.
So why would...
So what you're trying to say, though, is that it's a vibration that they can't necessarily hear, but it's still a sound.
Well...
So technically...
If you don't hear a vibration, is it a sound?
I'm being picky. But,
Okay.
you know what I mean? It's still, something that they can't see, that's made them feel off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And has made them panic. So it fits the theory that I was on about, basically.
Yeah.
But in terms of the den and stuff, that could have been done by something else from... Does it sound like it was done recently? Like, from the point that they found the bodies?
Yeah, it seems because they had quite a lot of snowfall since it was months after, right? And
it was literally 3 months and 3 days when they found the den.
Yeah, and the bodies were buried under some level of snow. Whether that was deep, I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into it. But there was clearly snowfall.
It obviously could have been... It was probably man-made from the pictures. It's literally been cut out. It's a bit too perfect to
be natural.
To just be a natural for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
You're suggesting possibly a Mansi
made
it in the past?
My theory is that it's a separate thing.
Okay.
So it might be infrasound, maybe or something like that that's made them flee the tent, but then they stumbled on that and then fallen in it. And I'm guessing so, but is it possible that falling into that from the height that it is, because it looks about 12 foot plus, if they'd fallen in that, it would break their ribs, right?
I mean, probably. It's going to be rock hard landing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but all of them would have to fall in.
Well, unless one fell in and then the rest of them realised there was a hole.
Yeah, and in the dark they wouldn't have seen, would they? If they're running. Like lemmings.
Like lemmings. Dyatlov Pass, the story of lemmings in Russia. Yeah, this is... The infrasound theory, again, like Stuart described with the avalanche thing, gives a reason for the evacuation. But the issue, again, is the injuries. And whether that's caused by them falling into the den, possibly.
Yeah. Well, I reckon the injuries... It's very possible that all the injuries are just... all the injuries could just be natural. Or, not natural, but no external thing has caused them, or they've been attacked or anything like that. It could just be that they've fallen over. Like you said about the eyes missing and stuff, if that is actually possible that the water can do that over time, then that's obviously a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you said some of the injuries, though, were like internal injuries without any evidence of external force, didn't you, at the very beginning?
All of those four in the den didn't show external injuries, besides little bruises and scrapes and stuff, like the other bodies.
Well, I just think if you fell into a hole and broke your ribs and had a massive chest injury, you'd expect to see something significant bruising, or they might puncture a lung. That would obviously accelerate the death, but yeah, I don't know. I would have assumed that there'd be more signs of trauma.
Yeah, it's really weird. Right, so let's move on to some supernatural stuff, because they're the most interesting, right?
Yeah.
Obviously.
So there's a really clickbaity documentary by the Discovery Channel which suggests that the Dyatlov group were killed by a Yeti.
Yeah.
It's called...
Now we're getting somewhere.
It's called Russian Yeti, The Killer Sleeps, which is a terrible name.
The killer sleep.
The Killer Sleeps. Which implies that it was hibernating, I guess, and they woke it up, and then it killed them, and now it's like roaming the Siberian wilderness in search of more eyeballs to eat.
More tongue. Give me tongue.
Okay, Stu. Give me tongue.
Give me tongue.
You do you, mate. You do you.
Right, so...
Sorry.
Hang on. I'm looking for something. We can look at a photo. So if you go to Theories and Yeti
Yeah.
on the website and scroll down a little bit, you will see a really terrible photograph.
Oh my god. Really? That's 100% a Yeti.
This photograph is the centerpiece of the documentary, and it's taken from one of the cameras of the hikers, which supposedly shows a Yeti.
I've seen that picture before.
You probably have. It's called frame number 17 of the Fibo Brignoli camera, if people want to look it up. So that's the evidence for a Yeti. It looks like a guy in a coat, very poorly photographed in the distance.
Although it is a wonderful focus shot of a tree.
It is, yeah.
That just happens to have a Yeti in the background. It's like, oh my god.
There's a great depth of field effect on the tree.
Yeah. Is it a real picture there?
It's frame 17 from one of the cameras. It's not
the problem is it's so blurry, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was trying to work out whether or not it looks like somebody wearing clothes, like whether or not you can separate it out into obvious like layers of clothing, like is there a coat and trousers clearly?
It looks like
now,
to me.
With the mind's eye, I want to say that there looks like a divide between top and bottom half to suggest coat and trousers.
Mm-hmm.
Has he got a hat on, maybe?
I think he's got his hood up.
Has he got a hood up? Yeah, I was going to say. Maybe he's wearing a snood.
Like a bandana over his mouth.
Yeah.
Or like over his nose. Maybe he's got a morph suit on. A black morph suit.
It's Power Rangers.
Power Rangers.
100% Power Rangers.
Okay, sure. We'll go with that.
That's my theory. Case closed.
So the documentary claims that the Yeti's superhuman strength explains the injuries of the den corpses, and that the Yeti ate the tongue of the woman, because that's what Yeti are very well known for. Their insatiable hunger for human tongues.
So your mum.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love this theory already.
The documentary's very biased as well. Like, they claim to have experts on to interview them, but they're all like cryptozoologists. So yeah, you can watch it if you want. I tried to, I couldn't really get through it. It was pretty bad. Take that, Discovery Channel, with your millions of pounds and dollars. Anyway, do you reckon that's actual? Do we agree with this? No? Shall we just move on?
No.
Yeah.
No, like, come on, mate. Well, no, that photo is really not.
It's not
complete evidence, is it? Really? No.
Okay, so
no, I'm not convinced.
We'll move from Yetis to aliens, because that's a natural progression.
Yeah. Obviously.
The theory that aliens were somehow involved, or a UFO scared the group into the Siberian night, is mostly based on camera frame number 34, or more recently photos from Zoltayev's camera. So, see if I can find this other photo. Theory's UFO. There we go, it's there. Now, again, this is another terrible photo, which apparently shows a UFO in the sky.
What is that?
It's a UFO.
Flare. It's fuck off. No. Controversy surrounding frame number 34. Like, where's the controversy? Right, let's just skip this.
No, we have to do it. No, hang on. If we go to Zoltayev's camera, there are better photos.
Really?
If you go to cameras, Zoltayev's camera at the bottom, there is a horrible photo of him with his eyes missing, so go past that.
Just skim
just
over
skip
that.
over that one.
Just close your eyes when you click on it and go down.
Oh my god, that picture.
That is horrible.
It's terrifying,
Oh, God.
isn't it? And yeah,
Oh,
there's
dear.
11 pictures from this camera, and some of them are apparently planes or UFOs.
Right.
Like 10 and 11, maybe, could be UFOs of some
Photo
sort.
8, is that the bat symbol? Is he calling Batman?
Yeah, he is. To save him, clearly. Who else would you call in Siberia when you're dying of freeze? You call Batman.
Freeze.
Wait, photo 11 does actually look like a plane.
Yeah, it does a little bit, doesn't it? Kind of.
Kind of.
Did you also click on it like me and zoom in and then go kind of?
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else it could be. That's it.
I panicked then because it started skipping photos again.
Avoid the
Don't show
eyes
me
and
the.
stare into my soul
Don't you
again.
dare! Don't you dare! Yeah, I mean, I'm still not
Yeah.
convinced or anything.
Well, these photos apparently show glowing UFOs against the night sky. In terms of evidence for this theory, this was the Cold War, and the Soviets were launching experimental aircraft and rockets all the time.
Yeah.
This is also backed up by a group of geologists, my people,
Ooh.
who claim to have seen glowing orbits flying in the direction of Ototen on the 1st of February. So that is around the right time of this happening.
Uh-huh.
Also, the man who was in charge of the Dyatlov investigation claims that he was ordered by members of the Soviet Congress to take out any reference to unknown flying objects or other strange phenomena in his statement during the inquiry. Now, whether that's a Soviet, we want to cover up our military stuff,
Which is more likely.
Which is more likely
honest, it's very
then we
Russian.
know there are aliens and we're trying to cover it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's aliens. Again, we've got some photographs which kind of show something, but they're probably Michael Bay lens flares.
Exactly. I'm not convinced on that one.
Yeah. Also, if it was Michael Bay lens flares, it would explain the noise that made them all panic, because there'd be explosions going off in the background.
Here was the start of Transformers.
It was
They're like, oh god, what's this terrible
The
film?
Dyatlov Pass does sound like a film title.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Dyatlov.
Also, interestingly, so just as I probably should have asked this originally, so the Dyatlov Pass is named after Dyatlov.
Yeah, Igor Dyatlov. He led the expedition.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was called before.
It had a Mansi name, which I can't
okay.
pronounce, and that's why I left it out.
Yeah. Is it difficult to pronounce?
Yes. It was called Don't Go There.
Call that Seattle.
It's called Death Valley. It's
Death
like,
Valley.
We should go walk through
That's
this.
in America.
That is true. Yeah.
Okay, so the last theory I've got is a conspiracy theory, as we like to cover on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, staying with the Soviet conspiracies, maybe the hikers were accidentally killed during a military test, and then it was covered up. There are records that the Soviets were testing military weapons in this area around the time the Dyatlov's group was there. And also, the geologists, eyewitness sort of thing, could suggest that they saw military testing, because they were like lights in the sky.
Yeah.
It's possible that the Dyatlov group could have been caught up in the testing of radiological weapons by the Soviets.
That's where the radioactivity came
It
from.
would explain the radioactivity, yeah.
Such explosions would account for the physical injuries of the den corpses and the large amount of radioactivity present on some of the clothes.
And I guess some of the injuries would have been consistent with like radiation exposure. Like well, actually, hang on, I'm not going to quote this, but in films, when nuclear bombs go off, people's faces melt. And that might explain why she had a melty
You're
face.
a doctor. How are you using films as references? Come on.
I mean, yeah, he clearly stumbles upon radiation victims all the time.
Yeah,
exactly.
The common occurrence in
Send someone down for an
A&E.
X-ray and they come back with a melted face.
I mean, you've got to see inside them, right? It's a risk we take. They might lose their face, but it's fine as long as we see that broken bone. So the hikers who had not been injured by the weapons would have fled the tent in a panic, and would get lost and freeze to death. Theorists then claim that the bodies were strategically placed around the area by the military, making a somewhat coherent story, in an attempt to cover up their murder. The claim is backed up by the leather mortar spots found on some of the bodies, which suggests that the bodies were moved after their death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So using the points of the case to make a conspiracy. I like it.
Yeah.
However, if this happened, radioactivity would be present on all of the hikers' belongings. So that's an issue. It's only present on 3 items of clothing, which was 2 jumpers and a pair of trousers. Now, the thing about these radioactive clothes is that all of them were owned by 2 hikers, and these people had previously worked in labs which handled nuclear material.
Right, so it's previously established radiation exposure on the clothing rather than it being from the incident.
Yeah.
I was going to say that, yeah. Is it like historical exposure that's just showing?
Yeah. One worked as a lab assistant in a top secret Soviet facility, and the other in a nuclear power plant. And this nuclear power plant was like, it's not very well known, but it basically had a massive meltdown like Chernobyl, but like on the level of Chernobyl. I can't quite remember the name of it, but it's quite interesting to look up actually, if you can find that in your spare time.
Yeah.
Now, this guy Zoltayov, who I've mentioned a few times, also fits with some sort of Soviet conspiracy. He was a military veteran who worked for the Communist Party, and he just happened to join the group at the last minute. There's also some recent stuff in the past year, where apparently the guy buried in Zoltayov's grave isn't him, after they carried out DNA analysis. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this, because it's a completely separate thing, and I'm also not sure of the details. I didn't look too much into it, but it definitely seems sketchy about this guy.
Yeah.
Like, just the timing of it. Like, he was a military veteran, he was much older than the rest of the group. He just happened to meet them as they were going on this expedition. So maybe he went on a secret mission for the Soviets to, like, I don't know. Maybe he thought they were, like, informants he was meeting up with, and...
Yeah, if he knew that there was testing going on in the area, maybe it was his job to kind of make sure that they didn't find anything.
Maybe, yeah. I read something about a weird CIA thing where they organised a meetup, but the hikers got in the way. But he used the hikers to help him on the journey to the meetup, or something weird like that. I can't quite remember the details, but... And also, it wasn't written very well, so I left it out.
The only issue, though, with that guy being involved in it is that, like, did he know it was a suicide mission? How did he get the injuries? Was he, like, eliminating people? Like, I don't get how...
Yeah, it's weird. Maybe
how
he
it all ties in.
Eliminated the guy with the great ooze coming out of his mouth. He did the old Soviet knee on the chest thing. And the others died of hypothermia for some reason. And then he, like, karate chopped the other guys and broke their ribs. Get like an old 80s action film. And then he committed seppuku, as they do in Russia.
Yep.
Yeah, so conspiracies, they often don't make sense, but they're interesting.
No.
So that's all of the theories I've got. What do we reckon? What do you lean towards? Any of them? There's the question. Because I don't think any of them explain it that well, to be honest.
No. They're all just slightly incomplete.
It's because there isn't enough information.
Yeah, of course, yeah. For me, I like the idea of something inducing panic. And I think that in all probability, it's going to be the noise of an avalanche or the noise of, I don't know, maybe a bomb or a plane or something. It's going to instill the panic in people at first. And it is literally just panic that sets hold, and all the sequelae of events that happens is all just because of the fact that people have gone out into -30, not wearing shoes, not wearing clothing, and it's just gone horribly wrong, and they've died. That seems to make a lot more sense. It doesn't explain everything, but like you said before, it gives it a timeline, and it gives a fairly logical procession of events that would follow and result in the deaths that it resulted in.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Sean?
Personally, I don't think it's anything supernatural, but there is just so many questions that need answering. Like, the radioactivity is just something that I think we've completely forgotten about until that last bit with the Russian weapons testing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I left the radioactivity out because it's well explained by the people working in the labs.
Yeah.
And like the tongue and the eyeballs, it's something other theories grasp onto and try and make the whole theory around it. But the fact that there are records of these 2 people working with radioactive material in Russia, in the cold, maybe they were wearing this coat, or afterwards or whatever, maybe they had some radiation on their body and it transferred to the coat after they left work.
Yeah.
But I think that fairly well explains where the radiation came from.
Yeah, it's not exactly provoking debate amongst us over other sources of radiation, is it?
Yeah.
No.
And it's not like radiation like that can be naturally put onto items of clothing just by the environment, unless there was, like, I don't know, a uranium mine nearby. Like, they were in a uranium mine. Yeah, so that's the radiation thing. I think it's fairly well explained. Like, I don't think any of these theories explain it properly.
Do you have any thoughts over what, like, if you were to, say, ignore some bits of the evidence, is there something that while you've been reading it, you've been thinking, I wonder if this could have happened?
Well, I'll read through what I've put in my notes, like as a wrap-up sort of thing, for what I reckon. So, there are two important unanswered questions in the Dyatlov Pass incident. One, what caused them to flee from the tent? Because obviously, cutting it from the inside out means that they were running away from something. And two, what caused the injuries that the people in the den sustained? So I think, as I said before, when I was doing the avalanche theory, I think that the story put forth by the avalanche theory explains it quite well. Besides the avalanche stuff, because I don't think an avalanche happened because there isn't any evidence of an avalanche happening. But I think the rest of the story, in the fact that they get split into several groups after leaving the tent. One group dies between the tent and the cedar. The other group makes a camp at the cedar, but two of them die. They then take their clothes and go further into the forest. They dig a den at the ravine, but they end up dying for some unknown reason. I think that's a good timeline to explain where the bodies are in relation to each other.
Yeah, also, if they took their clothes, it would explain why the bodies would show evidence of being moved, which wraps that up fairly nicely as well.
A lot of the small details are explained by that timeline, but it lacks a reason for escaping the tent, and it lacks a reason for the physical injuries of the last four bodies. And I don't think any of the theories explain the physical injuries of the bodies.
No, that's the sticking point for me.
Especially no.
But a lot of them, most of the theories tend to start with a reason why they evacuated the tent, and most of them are valid. Like, the sound of an avalanche would be a reason why they evacuate the tent.
Or a Yeti.
Or the bellowing of a Yeti as he's hungering for tongues.
Yeah.
Infrasound explains why they left the tent, because they were, like, really anxious about something. Like, it's that feeling of, I'm worried and I'm being watched, that you get sometimes, but I imagine to a really high extent.
Do you know what, though? The only problem that I now have, and this is only thinking, like, my brain is just dawning on it, is that they walked away from the camp in single file.
Did, yeah.
There was no evidence that people were running. So if they were panicking, why weren't they running away in
maybe they couldn't run because it was too
cold.
The snow was too deep.
Yeah, perhaps. Actually,
maybe.
I hadn't thought about that. I was just thinking that you'd expect it to be.
Would you be able to run
frantic
if you were in -30 with no shoes on?
No, but would there be more suggestion of it being a bit more frantic than just a nice single file, orderly line?
Yeah.
I
suppose if they're running in the same line, the person in front is going to be able to break through the snow and leave an easier path to run. I do actually. I think it's a mix. The two things I really like are the infrasound bits, more because I've never heard of it before. It's an interesting phenomenon, because it's actually proven to happen. It fits with my original perception. Like, if they heard any kind of sound, or obviously infrasound you can't hear or such, but you can feel it or whatever, that blind terror, like the fear of the unknown, that's what would have made them be so, like, haphazard or not logical thinking. Just like, what the fuck is that? Let's just get out of here.
Yeah.
That I like. But also the Russian weapons testing. Especially if it was around the time of the Cold War, which it was. You do hear a lot of conspiracies and stuff about Russian, the military. It's very secretive, isn't it? Like you said, all of it's classified for all the troops or whatever. KGB could have been involved. In that area, they could have a secret bunker. I know I'm stretching the theories and stuff, but that's what we're here to do. So that den could have been an old or a recent attempt at digging.
Yeah, it could be a training exercise, couldn't it? Putting them out in the mountain.
I like that theory. I don't think one of them is going to be correct because, like you said, they don't really explain everything. So I think one of them will be a reason that they fled the tent and then they stumbled across something.
Yeah,
which makes for a better film
mixing
anyway.
a couple of them together.
Mm-hmm.
There are these things called parachute bombs, and these are what the military testing theory is based around. And it's basically these bombs that are used in World War II, which you drop from a plane on a parachute, and they explode in the air, like a few feet above the ground. And they kind of do a concussion effect sort of thing, where they would cause internal injuries, but not leave external damage. And that's the thing that people attribute to the den bodies, if you believe the military testing theory. But then you have to believe that the military then covered it up and placed the bodies around the area.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you're suddenly trying to stretch the evidence to fit the theory rather than the theory being lent to it by the evidence.
Yeah.
The stoves thing still makes me wonder. The charred clothing.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. So, another theory has been put forth by a YouTube channel called Let Me Know. If you search Dyatlov Pass on YouTube, it should be the first video. It's got 3 million views.
Sure.
And it pretty much gives the timeline of the avalanche theory, but says that the reason they left the tent was because this stove thing caught fire that they made, because it was really dangerous. And the evidence they cite for it is the fact that it's present in a lot of the pictures from the cameras, and also there was fire damage on a lot of the clothes. A problem with it, though, is that in a lot of the pictures before they went missing, the clothes are fire damaged already. So that could be the stove has been causing them problems for the whole trip and already caused fire damage. Or it could just be that the fire damage had been caused already and the stove is completely unrelated.
Because what I was wondering is, like, for example, if the... because you say it was a makeshift stove.
Yeah, he made it himself, because it kind of, like, goes into the roof of the tent.
Like, imagine if, like, it was just, like, it went wrong and the tent was filling with smoke.
Yeah.
And then you cut a hole in the tent to try and get rid of the smoke. You're not getting anywhere. It doesn't necessarily set on fire because it's just something smouldering, creating smoke. So people try and use their clothes to fan the, like, you know when you, like, stamp on a fire with a towel or something like that? They might have just been using their clothing to try and put out the fire. That gives the fire damage. It puts a hole in the tent. And then the weather gets bad. People get hypothermia from with... No, that's probably stretching actually. I was going to say starting to get cold while they're in the tent and then get that weird panicky. Well,
maybe they...
But again, it doesn't quite
Maybe they cut their way out of the tent because of the smoke and they leave the area because they think it's going to catch fire. And the plan is to go to the tree line, climb a tree, watch the tent, see if it catches fire. If it doesn't, we'll go back to it. But obviously they get split up along the way and they all die of hypothermia. But again, it doesn't explain the den and their physical injuries.
Yeah. Maybe the stove did it. The stove broke
the candlestick.
in the drawing room of the tent.
We did say it was a nice tent.
It was. It's a luxurious Russian tent. But something I saw on Reddit, which isn't a good source for stuff, but apparently the stove wasn't put up on the night that they went missing. And I think that's because photographs, like the last photographs they took of the tent, didn't show the stove in it. It was like disassembled on the floor. Okay. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, citation needed. But that would blow the whole stove theory out of the water.
The stove couldn't possibly have killed them if it wasn't assembled.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is a weird one. Like, it doesn't quite have enough information to come to a conclusion.
No.
And that's why I like it.
Yeah, it is. It's a really interesting story. Like, I had never heard of that before either. So hearing it for the first time and hearing the sequence of events is quite frankly, it's pretty terrifying. Like, I can't imagine what it must be like to slowly freeze to death. Like,
as well, in the pitch black darkness. Because there's no source of light at all in this area, besides the moon.
I guess the moonlight.
But
yeah,
Like, imagine it just being pitch black and you're following a person in front of you in single file and then they're gone and you don't know where you are. And then you're just slowly freezing to death. And you fall over and you fracture your skull by falling over from head height, maybe. And then you're like dragging yourself.
Landing on solid ice, remember. Like -30, that snow is going to be solid, actually.
Mm-hmm. And then you're like dragging yourself in the direction you think the tent is with your skull fracture. And then you just slowly die. Oh, God.
And then your eyeballs get eaten.
Siberia sucks. Ugh.
I
don't want to go to Siberia.
No.
Listen to ramblings of a madman for all your positive.
Yeah, want a positive outlook on life.
Great pictures, yeah.
And holiday destination ideas.
It is quite interesting as a theory.
Actually, we're doing holiday destinations quite well, aren't we? We've represented the Atlantic Ocean, Japan, America, Siberia. We need to go Egypt. We've done. We need to go somewhere.
Same would visit again.
I think we're doing public service announcements where we're saying don't go to these places because bad stuff will happen. So eventually we'll cover the entire globe and you just have to crawl into a ball and die because there's nowhere left to go.
And on that
note... yeah. But before we go, I do want to say to listeners out there, check out this website, dyatlov.com. If only to go onto the cameras and look at all the photographs, because they're really interesting, a lot of them.
Yeah,
they are,
advised.
Actually. That's true.
Discretion advised, because there are some graphic photos.
It does say when they're graphic, though, but there's basically just like the timeline of events shown by the cameras, where they're in these little villages first, and then they're like taking a horse and cart to the next place, and they're like writing in a notebook and posing for the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a UFO at the end, apparently.
Is it? No. That's the one that annoys me the most. Like, they could have picked a better picture. Like any of the other pictures, like you said, they do actually look closer to a UFO or like a plane or something like that. But that it's not even a lens flare. It's just like someone's dropped their camera and taken the picture of it.
What's the photo they took before they died? Come on. It's their last photo.
Well, yeah.
They can't frame it very well. They've got frozen fingers.
Yeah, but come on.
And their eyes are missing from being...
It's not a UFO, okay?
Their eyes are missing. They've got no idea what they're taking a picture of.
Oh.
Okay, well, that's me. That's me sometime. I can't argue with that, can I?
Perfect. I think we're done here. Wrap it up. Just before we end, I'd like to thank 1000 Whispering and what I can only assume is the ghost of C.S. Lewis for their comments on the last episode. If you want to be featured in the next episode, please leave a comment or review on the website of your choice. We are currently available on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast, that's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening and we'll see you next time.
Bye!